All right, everybody, welcome to Her Take. We are incredibly excited to welcome Kaizen Asiedu. How'd I do? Did I get it right?
8 out of 10.
It took me like 8 out of 10. Yeah. Do it for me, please.
Kaizen Asiedu.
Asiedu, damn it. Anna could have done it better. Welcome to the show. Your list of accomplishments is staggering. We're all so excited to have you here. Okay, I have to read it because it's such a long list. So, you're a Harvard grad, educated in philosophy, turned Emmy-winning producer who helped bring global sports events like the Mid-Season Invitational and the World Championship to life at the Riot Games. But in 2020, you walked away from that to focus on a career of personal transformation, coaching, and cultural commentary, which is where Amy first learned about you and fell in love. Since then, you've built your following on your sharp, non-partisan takes that challenge tribal thinking, which is where I personally fell in love with you. And we've all seen you on Piers Morgan, Uncensored, in viral clips across all forms of social media. Your coaching work and speaking work, we can find you at Kaizen Asiedu and theclearthinkeracademy.com for more. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. All right, guys, today it's an electric show. We're going to be diving into everything from the federal takeover of D.C., Trump's citywide sweep of the homeless tent camps, tunnels under the Smithsonian, my insane appearance on the Abby Phillips show, why Nick Fuentes is suddenly throwing shade at Tucker and Candace, and of course, what we know so far regarding Trump's meeting with Putin. So we're going to start with a big one, D.C. policing. Part one of this story is about how we got here, why the Trump administration decided to federalize the Metropolitan Police, so what led up to it, and how a city that's home to Congress, the White House, and the Supreme Court ended up with crime so bad that even people with, let's say, tough reputations and big balls are getting assaulted. So, Lindy, you are up.
Well, this is one of the most controversial stories coming out of this week. President Trump has issued an executive order to basically, he's trying to federalize Washington, D.C. They have a Home Rule Act that passed in 1973, but he's saying that he has the power to take over the city and to help bring down crime. I do want to say that he may not go to the extent that he wants to because Republicans do not have the votes necessary in the Senate for him to fully do this. But there have been howls of protest, not only in D.C., but around the country. Allegations of racism, allegations of bias, that he's clamping down on a city with a significant black population. And I do want to address right off the bat some of the strongest arguments against what he's doing, which I think are ultimately hollow. For example, one of the most frequently brought up arguments is that crime is at a 30-year low. Okay, let's talk about that.
Right.
But crime was historically ubiquitous. Crime has been so high that even if it did come down in recent years, since the pandemic, for instance, it's still remarkably high because our baseline was that high. So please do not gaslight us about that. And also, my co-host Anna brought up a really good point the other day. Someone in the a police commander was actually suspended because she was cooking the numbers.
Yes, it was actually Michael Pullman from the Metropolitan Police Department has been placed on leave pending an investigation that he had essentially manipulated the crime numbers to make it appear as though crime had gone down significantly. Now, this is the thing about crime statistics. There are all sorts of issues with methodology, and especially when the reporting requires police to submit the data because, the police department has its own interests. They want to make it appear as though they're doing a good job. They want to make the crime numbers look like it's going down because it's a reflection of how well they're performing their duties, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know how realistic the crime going down is. I don't know what the real numbers are because of this issue.
There's more to that, though.
There is.
Go.
So one other thing that I'll just say is, even if you take the current crime statistics as they're reported and you ignore the fact that this, Metropolitan Police Department official has been placed on leave, the crime statistics still are not as low as they were prior to the pandemic. And one of the areas where it hasn't gone down much is carjackings. So depending on which municipality you're talking about, you know, in San Francisco, for instance, they don't have a problem with homicides, but they have a problem with property crimes. In DC, there's a huge issue of like literally teenagers doing these carjackings and these joyrides. And I don't think the city has really gotten a handle on it. And the whole thing that kind of sparked this drama is that, you know, that Doge saw.
I was gonna.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Lindy.
This guy, Michael Cristioni, AKA Big Balls, as we all know him, a Doge staffer, a former Doge staffer, was brutally assaulted in the middle of a carjacking. Actually, the Metropolitan Police is pretty effective in putting an end to it, ironically.
Yeah, they were right around the corner and they saw it all go down.
Exactly. Yeah. And so this was the impetus. I honestly, my take is that Trump was probably going to do this anyway at some point down the line, and this is the perfect impetus for him.
Right. Can we pull up that graphic again? I'm not sure if that was something that was displayed. Do you want to cue this up? Because there's something I wanted to mention.
Yes,
here.
absolutely, Amy. The White House is actually saying that he should be awarded the same exact medal as civil rights icon Rosa Parks. How do you guys feel about that?
Well, this is an incident. This is an incident where language is kind of being manipulated a little bit, though, because the medal in question that they're actually referring to here is the Presidential Medal of Freedom. It's been given to a lot of people, actually. It's not a super rare medal to be able to receive. And on that note, what's interesting about the Rosa Parks story, I actually dove into this when I saw that they wanted to give him the same medal that she received. And this is verifiable on Wikipedia as well, by the way. Did you know that like a civil rights movement targeted her and basically essentially asked her to ride on the bus every single day until an incident like this occurred, so that way they could kickstart the civil rights movement. And then they awarded her the medal. There was actually another woman prior to that, well, a girl, actually, she was only 16 years old, that they were going to use. However, because she was a teen mom, they didn't think she would be the best reflection of the face.
Because Rosa Parks is a perfect candidate for them.
I mean, it's smart strategy. I mean, the civil rights movement used the strategy of nonviolence, and then when they were met with violence, it was a way of, you know, being sympathetic figures. And it got more people on their side. I actually think that was a brilliant strategy.
They also had things called sit-ins. They would go to a whites-only counter and then wait to get, you know, talked to. So,
the point,
stay here. Stay with us on this one for right now.
That's actually good because I haven't finished just laying everything out. And I do want to quickly address something really important point that you brought up about police baking the numbers to make themselves look good.
Yes.
One thing that we haven't mentioned yet is the fact that they've been reclassifying crimes altogether.
Yes.
The things that have been previously flagged as felonies are now misdemeanors, so obviously it looks like a crime drop when it actually hasn't been that way.
Can I add one more thing to that? So in that article you sent, Anna, the police union, the Fraternal Order of Police, claims that the practice of lessening the crimes that are put on whatever the report is a broader directive from department leadership citywide. So it's not just Pulliam.
Yeah.
And
it's nationwide. It happens everywhere. And it's a symptom, I hate to say it. I'm sorry, I got to say it. George Soros has been funding extremely leftist prosecutors around the country. It's not just D.C., it's also Philadelphia, my hometown. San Francisco, actually, they got a slightly more conservative guy now. But Los Angeles, for instance, these people are not just soft on crime. Let me be clear. They're limp on crime. They're not doing anything on crime.
I mean, we experienced that in LA for sure. So I know that that's been an issue. Look, the one thing I will say is I'm not one of these people who minimizes the impact of crime on neighborhoods across the country. And like I said, it differs depending on which municipality you're talking about. And each city has its own policing policies and their own policing reforms, right? So the question is, what can we do to solve the increase in crime in these different cities and the type of crime that's increased in these different cities? And when you go to DC and you consider the fact that these carjackings are a problem, they're carried out by groups of teenagers.
Yeah.
So the carjackings, I think, is a symptom of a deeper problem. And I don't know if federalizing the law enforcement in DC is necessarily going to solve it.
Well, obviously they're being encouraged by people. Like, sorry.
I want to go to.
I just have
to
30
yeah,
quick
of course,
seconds.
of course. And then I'm going to give everybody their chance. But
Obviously, these kids are being groomed and coached into that by adults to carry out whatever crimes, to bring back whatever stealings or winnings that they get from these carjackings to the people who groom them to do this. And so imposing those strict punishments on them and federalizing doesn't address the root issue of the people who are grooming them to do it in the first place.
Organized crime.
Exactly.
I agree with you 100%. Go ahead, Kaizen.
Sorry, guys.
Okay. Yeah, so one thing I'll note is that we are much more quick to react to acute solutions to chronic problems than the chronic problem itself. And what's the chronic problem? Well, our capital city, I mean, it's a district, but our capital city in America is a dump. It's degenerating, it's decaying. I just went there for the inauguration. It's gross. It's a bad look for America, and it's emblematic, actually, of the state of cities in America more generally. You know, you go to Singapore, the first place you arrive is a beautiful airport that gives you a perception like, oh, this country has it together. You go to Tokyo, there's little kids and women walking around at night alone, fine.
Yeah.
Super comfortable. You go to DC, you have to watch your back constantly. So they say, okay, well, crime is at 30 years low. Well, what's been going on for the last 50 years? For the last 50 years, crime has been on the rise. It's been too high. And even if there's been a 30% drop, as you said, Lindy, on a baseline of high crime, it's like, that's still bad. So our standards have become so low. And one of the things about chronic issues is you just get used to it. Like you just get used to your city being in decay, or homeless people and mentally unwell people on the sidewalk, or being threatened or catcalled or whatever is happening. And then when someone actually has the big balls to address the problem, then all the attention's focused on them because that's an acute thing. But we haven't been talking about the chronic thing.
Yeah.
So if people want to protest Trump taking action here, I want to see you protest with that same energy against the complete decline of American cities.
Right.
And obviously, just federalizing DC and just addressing crime is not the only thing. Like there's socioeconomic factors, there's other things to address, but this is a start.
Yeah,
That's totally right, and that's totally right. But they're never going to protest the decline. You know why? Because leftists run the cities, and they don't want to take any responsibility.
denying it.
Well,
I think that is a problem.
Another thing
I think that is a problem. The unwilling look. Here's the problem. If you are on the left and you're offended by this conversation, I need you to understand, when you create a vacuum, when you deny that a problem is a problem, what does that vacuum lead to? It leads to the right coming in with their proposed solutions. So you're either part of the solution or you're not.
Also, this is just so
That's a
dumb.
really great
On
point.
every single 80-20 issue, they are on the wrong side. How can you be against cracking down on crime? Are you an idiot?
they're saying
Well, should we play devil's advocate?
I want to play
here?
devil. Okay, do you want to do it, Anne?
No, you go first. I have one too. I want to hear what you.
Well, okay, because I just litigated it actually on Abby Phillips, and the argument is that he's going to federalize all cities.
But he doesn't have the power.
He doesn't
I
have
know,
jurisdiction or
I know, but
he
let's.
doesn't even have the power in D.C.
He doesn't, but he did say, let's be fair.
For 30 days, to be clear.
He went on to say, he did. If I need to, I will declare a state of national emergency. And I was like, is that, no, there's no way he could get beyond those 30 days, but he did imply.
All right, well, let me address the national
Congress can
emergency.
But he said he would do it without them by declaring a national emergency.
I got to address the national emergency point.
Go,
Because
please,
he used the
I couldn't
same exact
figure-
argument for tariffs, and let's
Right.
see how that's panning out. It's right now, it's being tied up in the courts, actively litigated. He may even have to return the tariff payments. That's what it's coming down to. So his threat of national emergency, by the way, I'm absolutely in favor of his actions, but honestly, looking at the facts and the legalese, he may not have the power to do that. So he's blowing smoke, as he often does. But
there are use that.
There are other avenues. So, for instance, the BLM protests and the riots as well happened at first under his first term, and he wanted to declare martial law in order to essentially get a handle on the protests and basically stomp them out. But he had people in his administration at that time who pushed back against him and said, if you declare martial law, we're all going to quit. Wow. And so he backed off and he decided not to do it. With his second term, he's really surrounded himself with people who go along with whatever he wants to do.
they're also much more effective this time.
Sure, but I mean, if he wanted to do something as extreme, in my opinion, as declaring martial law to federalize police all across the country, like that is, in my opinion, a legitimate concern. But at the same time, again, I want those who are worried about this, and I am worried about that, to consider the fact that if you ignore a problem, well, then you're going to create like a groundswell of support for more authoritarian measures, and that's what's happened. Look at the polling. Look, most Americans are actually in favor of what he's doing.
Yes, it's like it's coming to a city near you, and in Los Angeles, it's like, God, I hope so.
I'll take it,
Right. You guys, are you aware that
Portland, my gosh.
Democrats are currently -25 on crime? You know where Trump is?
yeah.
+1. Harry Enton, of all people, said this on CNN.
Yep.
So honestly, the American people are behind this guy.
Yeah, I mean, and it's great. I've heard so many stories of people saying they actually feel safe to leave their house for the first time after years and years of being there. I'm on board with it. Let me just make my position absolutely clear. However, to play devil's advocate, because I always like to feel out both sides of the argument, is the precedent that it could then send when Trump isn't president. See, I trust Donald Trump. I may not trust the person who is next in power. And if this type of precedent is set, it could also be employed, for example, if there is a protest, a legitimate protest, and they don't like the dissenting voices.
That's exactly right.
It could be weaponized against us if we're the ones to leverage this card initially. And so that is the concern in my mind. When I've heard people talk about what they're most worried about, that to me is the most legitimate of them all.
And if you're cracking down on street crime, to your point, you're dealing with the symptom, but is there, like, what happens when the federalized police, right, are no longer on the ground fighting street crime? Right? Have you dealt with the potential crime rings that are doing the grooming, getting these teenagers to engage in this criminality, knowing that teenagers aren't going to suffer the same types of legal consequences?
That's why this is happening. I was actually just speaking with Chris Moritz about this, who wrote a book called Failed State about California. And these child soldiers are being recruited to even commit assassinations because they don't have any type of consequence. There's no more juvenile hall. And two other things I want to throw out to you guys. Apparently, the police chief, Pamela Smith, said that she needs the help.
Exactly.
Wants the help.
Yes.
She plans to work with federal officials to drive down crime. And even the mayor said that she wanted to see how she could make the most out of the additional officer support. So that was very interesting to me. Kaizen, what do you think about that? And what do you think we need to be looking at long term? And then I want everyone to weigh in on this with final thoughts.
Yeah, so we should go back to what was the reason why the Home Rule Act was actually instated. Because originally, D.C. used to be under federal control. And then they said, hey, now we're actually going to allow D.C. to self-govern and have a mayor and have its own local police force. So originally the idea is we need to give this area more sovereignty, and there were black communities in there, and they said, hey, there's basically segregationists in Congress who were calling the shots in D.C., and they said that's unfair. So there was an incentive mismatch that they tried to correct for, but unfortunately, the correction has actually created more crime. So in the long term, what actually needs to happen is we need to figure out, okay, why is there so much poverty in D.C.? First of all, this is an area that has some of the richest zip codes in America, because a lot of our U.S. politicians live in the outskirts, and some of the poorest as well. So why is there so much crime? Why is it that federal law enforcement doesn't have, or sorry, local law enforcement doesn't have the resources that they need in the first place?
That's the part that I found so alarming.
Yeah, so there's something going on in the governance of D.C. that's not right, and that needs to be examined first, or not first, because this is happening first, but second, after we address the immediate issue, which is there's crime happening. But yeah, clearly DC's experiments of having this kind of hybrid local federal governance is not working. It's just not working. So I actually think Trump is well within his rights to take control. He can only do it for 30 days. I think, unfortunately, by the way. But
I don't disagree
yeah,
with you.
he can only invoke this part of the Home Rule Act for 30 days, and then they have to actually figure out a long-term solution. But you know, to the point about, oh well, what if he does this in all cities? I actually think it's good. I think it's good that he even makes the threat, honestly.
Yeah,
because these other mayors in these cities that are, yes, Democrat-run cities, they're not going to do anything if their position is not threatened. And often what happens with Trump is it's kind of like there's a shock and awe where he draws massive attention to an issue. Like even with tariffs, it's like, yes, other countries have been tariffing us at a higher rate than we've been tariffing them for decades. No one even thought about it before Trump mentioned it. Same thing with crime. We have our cities in decay. No one thinks they can even do anything until Trump says, I'm going to do this thing if you don't get it in hand. So, yeah, I think it's important. I don't know if it's him just trying to incentivize action or he's serious about taking the action, but you need to be a bully sometimes. And I'm glad he's bullying for the benefit of the American people.
Yes.
I want to disagree. I
with that.
wish I could find a way to disagree because I know the argument. It's like he's authoritarian, he's a mob. But I admit, it's like, please, God, go to a city near me.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts?
Yes, I have to say, by the way, you are a man after my own heart. Completely agree with everything you just said. I also just want to end with this. I do want to give the mayor credit for not indulging in allegations of racism. She's like, no. Like, if someone tried to bait her on MSNBC and she just didn't take the bait.
Yep.
One thing I want to make clear, when you are only operating at one speed, when you see racism in everything, people stop listening. When you accuse, for example, when you say that Trump's crackdown on crime is racist, when you say voter ID requirements are racist, that meritocracy is racist,
Taking
that
soda off SNAP is
yes,
racist.
That,
I mean,
exactly, if
the
strong
list is long.
borders are racist, that putting Americans first is racist, you're the boy who cried wolf. We're gonna tune you out.
More importantly, I mean, look at polling of, Black Americans and how they feel about crime and policing. Because I think that there's a small group of activists that have essentially taken it upon themselves to speak on behalf of Black Americans. But when you look at the polling, Black Americans are worried about crime. They don't want to cut the police force. They want more active policing to deal with it because guess what? You make a really good point about how there's this economic inequality, and that's the through line in a lot of these big cities. There's a lot of wealth and there's a lot of poverty. But what also perpetuates poverty is crime, right? So opportunities are ripped away from people when they don't feel safe in their own neighborhoods. And so I just think that it's really, really important to consider, yes, the socioeconomic factors that play into this, but more importantly, what people actually think about crime and policing based on the polling, what they want to be done about it. Don't let activists basically hijack the narrative and speak on behalf of everyone because they're usually pushing a specific agenda that might not even jive with people that live in these communities. And consider what these, crime incidents do to like young people who, again, will have opportunities snatched away from them if they don't feel safe. If there's like someone selling drugs on the corner of their neighborhood or their street, like these are things that harm people and stop them or hinder the progress in their lives.
In fact, the people who are most targeted by crimes are the people in these Black neighborhoods who can't get out.
Right.
They're being terrorized by a small, tiny group of people, and their futures are being hijacked by these crime-ridden neighborhoods. They can never see a way out and a way up. So honestly, we should not, other demographics are able to move elsewhere, but people who are impoverished have to stay where they are. So we got to do everything we can to make sure we provide a safe environment.
You gave me a good transition. I actually want to jump into what's going on with the homeless tents, and then
Sure.
we're going to get to the tunnels.
Okay.
So the crackdown is not just on criminals. Following the federal intervention, a sweeping operation was launched to clear homeless encampments across the Capitol, particularly in the high-profile areas, so Foggy Bottom, Kennedy Center, East Street Expressway, and near the U.S. Institute of Peace. But prior to these operations, 70 encampments have already been removed since March 2025?
Yes. So let me kind of set the stage for this story because Trump's efforts in federalizing police in D.C. goes beyond crime. He's also focusing on clearing out homeless encampments. And so after that DOJ staffer, Edward Korenstein, who of course also goes by Big Balls, was assaulted, he announced this plan, Trump announced this plan. And some interesting things have happened in D.C. ever since. So for instance, according to the Associated Press, Trump wrote on his social media site before Monday's news conference announcing the takeover that homeless people will have to leave immediately. Quote, "We will give you places to stay, but far from the Capitol," he posted. And so after he made that announcement, obviously very vague, people are like, you're going to give them places to stay. What does that mean? Where are they going to go? You say far away. And so reporters asked White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt about it. Let's see what she had to say.
Oh, we need a little volume on it, team.
To be offered
Restart.
addiction or mental health services, and if they refuse, they will be susceptible to fines or to jail time. Again, these are pre-existing laws that are already on the books. They have not been enforced, which is part of the reason for this federalizing of the National Guard to bring in this assistance for law enforcement. While we are targeting criminals and trying to remove criminals off of the streets, we also want to make DC safe and beautiful, and that involves removing mentally disturbed individuals and homeless encampments as well.
So the big concern is, are you criminalizing people living in poverty? Like, what's going on here? And, you know, the reality is, okay, so let me just read that graphic, because according to the Associated Press, near the Institute of Peace on Thursday morning, AP journalists saw about a dozen homeless DC residents packing their belongings. Items weren't being forcibly thrown out by law enforcement, but an earth mover dug out and scooped away the remains of encampments, depositing them into the bed of an idling truck. And prior to Trump's announcement, I didn't know this, apparently the National Park Service had already cleared out like 70 encampments, but that got no attention, right? Because Trump wasn't involved, so that got no attention. Right. But look, Trump getting involved has had an interesting impact on city leaders, because all of a sudden city leaders are like working overtime to find shelter, to create, you know, a place for these people to live in, rather than just leaving them out on the streets. And the question is, why did it take Donald Trump for city leaders to do that? You get what I'm saying? Why was it okay to just allow people, many of whom do have mental health issues, they need mental health care, many of whom are struggling with addiction, why was it considered okay to just leave them out on the streets to suffer like that?
That's Schellenberger's position in San Francisco.
How is that?
They're dying of fentanyl overdoses. When you're done, I want to read you some of the crazy shit that happens in these tent camps.
No, but like, this is the thing that drives me crazy. How does the left make an argument that the kind thing to do, that the humane thing to do, is to allow your fellow Americans to suffer on the streets like that? And why did it take Donald Trump for you to want to do something about it?
Because in there, by the way, the same thing happened in Philadelphia. Our entire Benjamin Franklin Parkway, I don't know if you guys heard about it, was taken over by homeless encampments. And they thought the humane thing to do was basically to have these open-air drug markets. They were selling drugs like right in front of the Rocky Steps.
That's exactly one of the things, right? So you've got violent crime that happens in there. You've got disputes, right, within the camp's residents and outsiders that escalate violence. You've got property crime and theft in the surrounding areas. You've got drug trafficking use.
Right there, like right
sexual
open.
assault on women that are homeless is 10% higher in these tent camps. When they did the sweep, they found weapons, drugs, and the spillover of crime goes into the surrounding areas. And one thing that I neglected to mention in our first segment is that they have over 100 arrests now. It went in the federalization of the police force, and there is a connection here because they pulled out a bunch of criminals from these homeless camps, illegals, drugs, and weapons. So there's a definite concern that something should be done here.
Well, when you're struggling with addiction, and obviously because of that addiction, you're unemployed.
Right.
You're going to need resources in order to get, you know, your next hit or whatever. And so you're going to commit crimes in order to get the resources necessary to buy the drugs you need. Otherwise, you're going to get sick, right? Like, that is this vicious cycle that we're all witnessing on the streets in these big cities. I mean, Kaizen, you live in LA. I do too.
Go to you. I want to do one thing before I do go to you, because you and I sort of touched on it in the break. So before I go to you, I want to tee this one up. So one of the great ironies here is that Newsom, in August of 2024, when he thought he was going to be the nominee, started to like puff up his chest and fight with the Supreme Court. And he's like, we're going to clear these homeless encampments, and I demand every city start taking action. Can I see that clip where he's literally goes for the photo op?
He does a photo op, totally.
He goes for the photo op and starts clearing away all the homeless stuff and throwing it away.
That is giving AOC at the border. Remember when she was crying?
Yes.
No, it was a total photo op. Gavin Newsom, as governor of California, allowed this issue to become a really big problem in the state. And then once he realized it was a political liability and he plans to run for president, he's like, he starts fighting pretty hard to get the United States Supreme Court to rule on basically allowing cities to ban homeless encampments.
Right.
He is
But when
a
Trump does
Democrat.
it's racist and authoritarian.
But that's the thing. That's the thing that drives me crazy. The double standard and how, like, if a Democrat does it, it's totally fine. If Trump does it, it's super offensive. So which one is it? Because
Trump is
Newsom
doing
fought for the right to be able to ban encampments.
All right, I'm coming to you. I unleash you, and then I'm going to go this way. I promise.
Yeah. So a few interesting things. This difference between being nice and kind.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what is actual humane treatment? Is it actually being nice to a homeless person to say, yeah, you can just sleep anywhere. You can sleep in a park. Yeah, you can do drugs in public. Is it actually being supportive of them, making the corrective changes that they need so that they can be empowered and get their life on track? I remember last Thanksgiving, I went to a friend's house and I met this guy, and you wouldn't know it from talking to him, but he was a former heroin addict. And he told me about he reached rock bottom where he was a heroin addict, and I guess at some point he like acted out. The police threw him in prison. And when he was in prison, he had actual boundaries. Like, he couldn't just do whatever he wanted anymore, and he actually had to make a choice. He had to make a choice. Am I going to continue on this path of degeneracy and hurting myself and hurting my future? Or am I going to respond to these hard constraints by getting my act together? And he chose to do that. Now he has a beautiful family, wife, kid.
That's great.
And if we allowed him to just continue on his path,
He would have been dead.
he would have been dead.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's like, nice is often when people are trying to be compassionate or empathetic, it's actually this fake nice.
Yes.
Where it's actually
Virtue
about
signal?
Yeah, it's a virtue signal that's
enabling.
more about making you feel good than creating a good outcome for the other person.
Yes.
Preach.
That
Yes.
is a absolute bar.
Yeah.
It's a song. You got to be cruel to be kind in the right measure, and in the right measure is the key there. At least Trump is doing something. I mean, it's ridiculous, the double standard, when you take into account the fact that when Gavin Newsom said he wanted to do something, clean up the city, I don't remember the exact figure, but wasn't it hundreds of millions of dollars that ended up being unaccounted for?
24 billion.
$24 billion.
Oh, wait, it was billions. Okay,
Billion.
sorry, I misspoke.
Get it right, Amy.
Billion with a B. Okay, that makes it so much worse.
No, it's infuriating. It's infuriating because it ended up being a racket to funnel taxpayer money from Californians to these nonprofits, many of which had ties to local politicians in California, and there was no accountability. Audit finds California spent $24 billion on homelessness in 5 years, didn't consistently track outcomes. And that wasn't the bug, that was the feature.
Right.
Okay, it was the theft of Californian tax dollars, and it did nothing to improve homelessness. During those 5 years, homelessness skyrocketed 30%. 30%. Because they focused on this, easy fix in their minds, right? Oh, it's just housing first. But no, it's not just housing first. These are people who need mental health care. Some of these people, are addicted to drugs, and they need detox and rehabilitation. Instead of detox and rehabilitation, the focus, at least in Los Angeles, was, let's do harm reduction, which is helping them maintain their addiction through, safe needles, pipes, and all sorts of things. But after that policy was implemented, drug overdoses skyrocketed. During the pandemic, there was a man who died, of an overdose at the entrance of our building. And it was the most horrific thing I had ever seen. That's cruelty.
Yes, absolutely. And one thing I want to make clear is when we basically shut down mental asylums, mentally ill people didn't just vanish into thin air.
100%.
They were either imprisoned or they're on the streets. We still need to do we still need to do what we can to provide the facilities, to provide the opportunities for treatment and rehabilitation.
Yes.
But right now, we're just letting them, lay out there.
So again, devil's advocate, what is the issue that people are taking with this? When the mental institutions were initially shut down, and I'm not privy to this info, was it like due to mistreatment?
Yes,
misdiagnosis?
it was. They were abusive,
Is the
very
concern
abusive.
that people have now that these people are just going to be
Take away their autonomy.
Exactly,
and
and
it's
then
inherently
put
racist.
into a situation where possibly the same thing would play out? Is that the position of
Yeah.
people
But
who are
right now,
upset
they're
about
in
this?
such dire need of help that their autonomy leads to drug use. And
Either way,
I'm just saying,
what is
that
the
goes
lesser
back
of-
to your amazing, really compelling argument. There's a strong distinction between being nice and kind.
Yeah.
You're what is it? You're enabling very destructive behavior
Enabling.
when you don't provide those programs for them to rebuild their lives.
Yes.
They need help.
And rather than say Trump is going too far. I actually think he's not going far enough, and here's why. People are saying, oh, well, you shouldn't be taking homeless people off the street because they're not going to have somewhere else to go. Then the demand should be Trump go further and take care of those people now that they have nowhere else to go.
100%, yes.
Don't say don't do anything. It's like if you're going to commit, go all the way and actually take care of these people. But the solution is not to just allow the current situation to persist because
honestly,
that's not fixing
yes,
itself.
Yes, amen. And it ties back to something we've been talking about for months. I'm sorry to mention this, but instead of instead of spending $116 billion a year and more, and that's a conservative estimate, some estimates put this figure at $500 billion. Instead of using billions of dollars on illegal aliens, we should be taking care of our fellow Americans who are living on the streets.
And to your point, Lindy, about the asylums that were absolutely abusive and terrible, I don't know why the idea of having new mental health facilities, modern mental health facilities, are automatically thought of as like the asylums of the 1950s.
Great point.
You know, we are smarter, we can be better, we are a rich country, and people need mental health care.
Yes.
And we need Congress, by the way, to allocate funding for it, because there's a lot of tough talk, especially after mass shootings, about how, oh, we need mental health care. But members of Congress, especially in the Republican Party, I'm keeping it real, always vote against allocating the necessary resources. We need to shift those resources to mental health care, and we need to help people detox and get rehabilitated so they can live good lives. I'm sick of seeing people die on the streets. And if you think that it is the good thing to do, the kind thing to do, to see people suffer on the streets like that because you're like on the left, but somehow you've bought into like this unhinged, far libertarian policy, you're wrong. You're just wrong. Your policies don't work. More people are dying as a result, and we're done with it.
Can I give you one thing on policy, real quick? So there were some pilot programs, or there are some pilot programs in California that follow this ethos of, okay, we're going to get you off the street. Now, in California, there's no criminal element, meaning you could go to jail. But we're going to get you off the street, and we're going to force you into treatment, or we're going to get you mental health care. So one of which is called the Care Plan, and there's something very similar called Laura's Law. So essentially, you would have the ability to say, all right, we're going to have a conservatorship, and we're going to force you into, this is just mental health, right? There's another one that extends to that, which is called Senate Bill 43, which allows you to 5150 addicts and force them into treatment. Now, the problem is that they're not forcing people into treatment, and there's no penalty for it. So the signups are only 18% of the people that get proposed. However, and 35% in San Diego. But listen to this. So despite the fact that they weren't forced to be enrolled, the success rate was actually pretty significant. So it says that 81% of the people improved their well-being, 75% were forced into it, regained control of their life, 90% stayed with the medical adherence with regard to getting off of drugs. Like, if you can force them into it, those rates are not bad and better than nothing.
California used to have a really good program that's kind of been upended as a result of these newer policies.
Right.
And it was the drug courts. Basically, if you have committed a crime as a result of your addiction, the courts would give you the option of, okay, you could either go to jail or you can go through an inpatient rehabilitation program. And that program was actually very successful in helping people get clean and avoid having like a criminal record because of their drug addiction.
Is it still offered?
No, because we shifted to a harm reduction policy of helping them maintain their drug addiction.
It's like a woke approach.
Yeah. This isn't, because I've known addicts throughout my life, and here's the thing, even addicts who want to change struggle to change unless they are nearly forced via an intervention, people coming in, helping them remove the triggers and the things that would entice them, right? The homeless people on the street, or these people who have, maybe antisocial behavior growing up, they didn't have the best influence, they're not going to have that. Right. Even the people who have that struggle to curb addiction.
Yes.
So how are we expecting these people to want to go in and say, okay, I will voluntarily sign myself up for this?
100%. And guess what, guys? It actually gets worse. Because in these progressive cities, there's something called supervised injection sites.
Oh, my God.
I kid you not. I kid you not.
Oh, God.
In Philadelphia, again, where I'm from, Governor Ed Rendell launched this program. This is a former governor of the Commonwealth doing this. They would have professionals watch as people partake in drugs. And if they...
So you don't overdose?
So they don't overdose. Yes, their argument is, at least someone's there. So if they overdose, we can save.
Yeah, and look, I get the thinking behind the clean needles, right? Because you don't want people spreading.
To help them get off drugs.
Yeah, look,
That's
we've tried it. We've tried it, and it's not working.
I neglected to mention is all of the disease that's rampant in there, and there are like flea-driven from rats, and
no,
that
the
end up
stuff that
spreading
I've seen
all
on the
kinds of
streets
crazy
is
diseases throughout
amazing. It's amazing that we're like there's a huge portion of this country that's okay with it. It's the most inhumane, disgusting treatment of human beings I have ever seen in my life.
Not okay with it, Anna. They're just pretending to be okay with
But
it.
they
so they
fight.
look empathetic.
They fight viciously. Okay, Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles, she just cleared an encampment in Van Nuys, California. This encampment was one of the biggest, and it was bad. Like, there was just a lot of suffering, right? So Karen Bass is very far left. So she's not going to criminalize these people. She offered them housing. And she says, she's on the record saying this. She was, of course, met with the activists. The activists were protesting her. And they were talking to the people in the encampments and telling them, reject the housing that's being offered to you. Karen Bass said that. She said that that's what the activists were telling the people in the encampments. How the hell is it good to keep people on the streets when there's housing literally being offered to them?
There's video of homeless people in these encampments saying that they don't want to go to the shelters. I swear to you, because they're not clean and their stuff could get stolen. I'm like, wait.
I mean, the encampments aren't clean and their stuff does get stolen. And in fact, people will get into these conflicts and light each other's tents on fire.
And they get like held up for rent by the local gangs.
Yes.
I want to go to final thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that people like to dance around when it comes to homelessness is just the idea of personal responsibility more generally. And we want to view people as helpless, oppressed, total victims who can't do anything. And the honest truth is that if you treat someone like a victim, they will victimize themselves. If you treat a homeless person like someone who's helpless, there's nothing they can do, they have to take drugs, so let's just make it safer for them to take drugs, then you're going to get that result. So what we need to start doing is actually treat them like a dignified human being and say, hey, look, what you're doing right now is hurting yourself, it's hurting everyone around you, and you can do better, but what you're doing right now is worse. There's a better way to live your life and there's a worse way to live your life. And it's okay to say that. But we're so afraid of coming across as judgmental. This is where all this language comes from. Oh, no, you're racist or you're elitist or any of these things. Like, no, actually, the most loving and caring thing you can do to someone you care about is tell them the truth and hold them accountable. And then you support them with what they need to go on the path of righteousness, not the path of degeneracy and hurting themselves. Like, who does this benefit at the end of the day?
Think about it as your family member.
The NGOs
suffering from addiction on the streets.
If it was your family member, you would never treat them this way.
100%. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, there are two things that I want to end with. Number one, a concept called suicidal empathy. When you allow an indulgence behaviors, you're not only hurting the drug addict or even the homeless person, you're hurting the entire community. And let me talk about the macroeconomic repercussions, by the way. You're bringing down property values and making it unsafe for kids to go to school. I mean, the consequences are vast. And there's something else. This is really prevalent amongst progressives. There's something called oppression envy, because they themselves are they're so privileged. You see them just protesting. Like, it's like protest tourism, shifting from one, protest
I thought that was
to another.
paid, actually.
Some of that is paid as well. Well, actually, that's funny because now DC, did you see that the ads in DC are going up for paid protesters?
Nice.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah,
Nice.
Exactly. But when people have this oppression envy, they latch onto these causes. They don't really have a deep understanding of it. They just think it's cool. For example, Maggie Gyllenhaal's daughter was at a random protest a couple of weeks ago. This is one of the most privileged children in the world. And they have no understanding that when they're abetting this behavior, they're actually enabling the self-destruction of the very people they're trying to help.
Yeah, and I think homelessness is something that requires a multi-pronged approach. Because the fact of the matter is there are plenty of homeless people who are like couch surfing, they might have had an abusive husband and they left with their children, but they're staying with friends, and they can't afford a place to live. So you do need to increase our housing supply. There's no question about that. But when it comes to street homelessness, we have to differentiate between the two.
Good job. There is an official definition of it. It's like unsheltered. And I can't remember the exact, but Gavin Newsom used it to manipulate the statistics and said, the vast majority are moms with kids, but it's ones that don't have a stable residence.
Yeah.
not the people on the street, which are statistically high percentage of drug addiction and mental illness.
Exactly.
Yeah, can I make one last statement
Please
on
do.
Gavin Newsom? Because
Hopefully you would go for
I
it.
try to stay away
Please
from personal
do it.
statements, but he's a politician, he's a leader, right?
Yeah,
And
you're allowed.
I've noticed this trend where he was mayor of San Francisco, and then he failed upward to governor of California, and now in my mind he's trying to fail upward to the presidency.
100%.
Yes.
And I encourage everyone to just be very wary of people who are more focused on criticizing problem solvers than the problems themselves. And I noticed this trend where before Trump talks about something, Gavin is silent on the issue. But the moment Trump is focused on crime or homelessness, all of a sudden Gavin has so many things to say.
Yeah.
So to me, it's just transparent political maneuvering.
Yeah.
And to me, as someone who's been a California resident and has seen California go downhill in the last 11 years that I've been there, to me, what matters is not just what you're doing, but how you're doing it. And I don't see Gavin doing either.
Yeah.
So sure, the ways that Trump goes about doing things sometimes, they can be brash, they can be bold, they do create problems, but we shouldn't be so focused on the problems of the solutions that we miss the bigger problems that the solutions are intended to solve.
Yeah.
Love that.
Are we ready to move on?
Yes.
All right, Ames, you're up. What is going on underground at the Smithsonian? So I guess there are tunnels underground
let's not
there?
get ahead of ourselves,
What's
though.
going on?
No, not too many people are talking about the tunnels just yet. So let's start from the very beginning. The tunnels is a little Amy tinfoil
I'm like, do we need our?
segment,
We
so-
like to do these. I think we need to take the Andrew Scholes and make ourselves these for these signature segments.
Oh yeah,
I
like
love
the
to do
jingle,
that.
like
Oh, yeah,
the
tinfoil
tinfoil
hat.
Come back. I'm going to have one for you. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Incredible. So also in attempt to clean up the crime and in attempt to clean up the homelessness, Trump is also now declaring that he wants to clean up the way that history has been essentially rewritten. The last several years and the way that wokeness has really bled into academia, history, and all of these other institutions as well. So obviously this is causing a little bit of a stir. Plenty of critics are calling it a racist and, tyrannical attempt to whitewash history. But guys, there is a third angle that suggests that the Smithsonian may actually be harboring secrets that have been kept like damn near since the dawn of civilization that can blow the lid off many different things. And we're going to get to that a little bit later. But first, let's start off with the letter to the Smithsonian that Trump put out here. As we prepare to celebrate the 250th anniversary of our nation's founding, it's more important than ever that our national museums reflect the unity, progress, and enduring values that define the American story. So essentially what is going to be encompassed throughout this is, number one, they are going to review all of the Smithsonian websites, written materials, and the social medias. From there, they are going to evaluate all current and planned displays. They are going to interview the curators and the senior staff, and they're going to ensure that American ideals are presented properly, okay? And we can circle back to that.
We're going to circle back.
We're
going to circle back to that.
So let me give
Don't worry.
let me give you some examples of some of the things that Donald Trump, and not just him, I mean, wokeness, even people who are on the left or were on the left, I'm sure many of them can admit the way that wokeness has bled into some of our most prominent institutions. And when it comes to history, it's very, very important that we're portraying things objectively. Now, who gets to be the arbiter of that? That's where things get a little bit dicey, right? I understand, I get it, but here's some of the things that Trump is taking issue with. Land acknowledgements, during events. That is one of the major things. Plaques reframing America's founding fathers as problematic and fallible. So, for example, right here we can see, admired for his time of courage, integrity, leadership, George Washington became an icon after his death, a man to be emulated in his monument celebrations, epic stories. While Washington can seem a distant figure to 21st century Americans, a modern scholarship focuses on the fallible men rather than marble hero. So the way...
That's not bad. I got a list that's real bad.
Yeah.
Let me know when you want to get
other
there.
countries would not be saying this about their funding.
I have no problem pointing these things out.
No, but,
but I'll give you stuff that's bananas.
okay.
Yeah, I
Let me
think
finish my
Jillian
list
has
and can
way
we
worse examples. Like that example I don't like because I think it's important to learn from our history,
Right,
both the mistakes and the
100%.
things we did right.
100%.
And yeah, he was a flawed individual.
I understand
That's
that.
okay.
What I'm
I
saying
mean, all
is that
people are flawed individuals. Donald Trump is a flawed
I'm just
individual,
saying,
all of them. But
I
it's
actually-
about the era in which we are trying to preserve and maintain their memory and the initial, like, knee-jerk reaction when you think of these people. And it seems like they were trying to reframe that specifically.
What I'm saying, I'm actually with Trump on this because there's no way, for instance, that China would be saying that about a previous.
I know, but do you want to
There's
be
no
like
way.
China?
I mean-
What I mean is, like, there's a certain reverence due for the founding father of
point.
America.
Okay, anyway, so
George Washington.
So Plaque's reframing, okay, the art exhibits aimed at dispelling traditional beliefs about westward expansion. And then we do have the white culture card, which, guys, we're going to circle back to the white culture card at the very end of the segment.
Yep.
But Jillian, please go ahead, give us some
Well,
of your
you know what? I
examples
want
as
you to
well.
do the tunnels because when we get to the white culture and some of these other installations that really do, in my opinion, exhibit a very biased, partisan take on history, and it is not all about slavery. So I don't want to, that's going to take us off the rails.
Okay.
I'm chomping at the bit. I really want to hear what all of you have to say.
Can we actually focus on that and then get back to the tunnels in the end?
You sure?
Yes,
I'd be okay with that, sure.
Yeah.
All right. So I get asked to do Abby Phillips, which I'm sure, unless you've been living under a rock for the last 2 days, you probably know. And I get the topics ahead of time, which we always do. And one of them is, Trump is trying to whitewash the Smithsonian. And stuff like that made me go like, ooh, oh God, I don't love that. How am I going to tackle this? I don't really know exactly what's going on. I've been out of the country for a month. Let me reach out to the comms team at the administration and just get to the bottom of like what in particular is really chapping your ass. I like seriously, like what? Hopefully we're not going to do that. I get a friggin' PDF that's got to be 50 pages. In it, the first thing that happens when you walk in the door of the American, the History Museum under the Smithsonian umbrella, because there are many different museums, obviously, under the Smithsonian umbrella. The first thing you see is a gay flag, and it's not during Pride Month, and it's the only thing there. So what I personally don't like about it is it's like, look at the progress the gays have made, which makes me feel like I'm not a part of our culture and our community, and it kind of pisses everybody else off and makes them resent the gays, just like we get an entire month, but veterans get a day. Like, that's uncomfortable and unnecessary and unfortunate. So I'm like, well, all right. I mean, okay, it continues. Then there's a whole thing. I'm gonna friggin' open it. It's so long. There's a whole thing about changing the game and is gender testing fair? But they go on to talk about how people used to make you drop your drawers and show your genitals. And I'm thinking, when the hell was this? Because right now it's a cheek swab. But they tie it to some sort of form of sexual assault. And then it's like, well, and this is a very complex issue. It's not a complex issue. It's a cheek swab to get an XX result or an XY result, which means biological male or biological female. And it goes on to talk about how unfair it is and what do you really think? And of course, it's pushing you towards this is like awful, grotesque, unfair, bigoted. It goes on in so many ways. There's one that I posted about with regard to Hispanic emigration to the States. Now, this one in particular I found bananas. So we're here in Miami. I lived in Miami for 3 years before moving to Wyoming. I know a lot of Cubans. You're married to one. I've heard a lot about Castro. So this is how they frame Cubans emigrating from Cuba. My old woman eyes, forgive me. All right, so here we go. It's important that we read this, guys. Civil wars, oppressive governments, and natural disasters pushed millions of people to migrate from Latin America and the Caribbean to the United States. Throughout the 1900s, the United States supported foreign governments that favored U.S. business and fought communism. And we all know the U.S. has practiced interventionist foreign policy. We know this, and no one loves it, okay? No one's trying to whitewash that. It then goes on to say, sometimes, oh, I just blew it. Actually, here we go. Sorry, guys. Sometimes, I did it again. I'm going to make you read this in about 3 seconds, Amy.
You want me to?
The long story is it goes on to say,
Whereabouts?
Oh my God. There's so much of it, and I.
Oh, there we go. Okay, tell me where to resume.
Okay. U.S. Okay, there. Read it.
Sometimes U.S. foreign policy
20-year-old
contributed
dies.
to the violence and corruption driving people to migrate. 30 now, actually. The United States backed numerous dictators, including Cuba's Fulgencio Batista and the Dominican Republic's Rafael Trujillo. Cuban, Dominican, and many other Latino communities still feel the effects of the war and revolution. Their stories reveal the human cost of immigration and the contradictions of U.S. foreign policy.
Okay,
That's right.
Okay,
No?
there's no mention of Castro whatsoever.
Oh, they don't mention Castro's name.
Right,
But
so-
they do mention the revolution, which is what spurred
but
Cuban
they blame
immigration.
it
to the
only on our interventionist foreign policy and our desire to fight communism.
I mean, so look,
Anna.
But I mean, they talk about the oppressive government, right? Like at the very
of
first
the
sentence.
dictator that we backed, not that.
No, I think they're talking about Castro when they talk about, you know.
His name's not even in there.
No, I know. They don't mention his name, and maybe they should, because that is what, like the Cuban Revolution,
Anna,
the communist
they don't. The United States backed numerous dictators, including, we didn't back Castro. So, including.
We backed Batista, who was a dictator.
Right.
Yeah.
But
And
there's
Trujillo.
no mention of Castro.
No, that's
who
fair.
is
That's
what
fair.
begot the mass
That
immigration.
sentence is written specifically in such a way that the blame is placed on the United States.
Solely on the United States, which is my argument, is that, okay, no problem. But then you got to kind of mention 1959 when Castro came into power and started killing everyone and jailing everyone, and Cubans fled. And they're thriving here in America right now, and most of them are conservative. Then you've got literally an exhibit that's all about white cops killing black guys. And there's nothing about how we fought back to stop, except we captured it with our cell phones. And thank God we did, because we put these cops on blast. And the reality is, we all know police brutality has been a thing, but there's nothing about fighting to stop it. There's nothing about evolving.
There's also nothing about the fact that if you look at the trends, the long-term trends in policing, you know, there was a focus on specific cases of police brutality, which were horrendous and terrible. But if you look at the overall trends, officer-involved shootings had consistently gone down every single year since
it's worse
the 1970s.
than ever. And it goes on to say that people of color are currently living under a regime of oppression and aggressiveness and prejudice. And it's like, are we ever going to show something good about our country? Then it goes on to talk about Benjamin Franklin. And it's all about electricity, right? So it's like Dr. Electric Ben or whatever the hell it was. And it says, by the way, he was a slave owner. And by the way, we think that the slaves actually played a huge role in inventing electricity, and he never freed his slaves. He did free his slaves. He became a huge abolitionist who completely repented and did a 180. And there's no evidence, whether you like this or not, to suggest that the slaves were involved in his experiments. And the thing that bothers me is it's like, you can just let the white guy have it, guys. He did invent electricity. You can say he was a slaver, but then you should also point out that he did a 180 and he realized how disgusting it was, and he wrote articles about it, and he was an active activist about it. And he did free his slaves. That is a lie.
Just give the full picture as opposed to a slice that's intentionally
I got two more
chosen to...
that I want to do, because these are... Go ahead.
Before you get to that, I just want to quickly comment on the very first example you gave about Latin American immigration or people from Latin America. So I feel like that summary was intentionally vague because it wasn't just about Cuba. And when you think about, you know, the U.S. did like a coup,
is just about Cuba.
like in Guatemala.
That clip is no. There's a whole
that was just
thing.
about Cuba.
That is just about Cuba.
Oh, okay, then that's different,
and
yeah.
Cuba and the Dominican. Because there are other parts, obviously,
Got it,
other parts of South America.
Got it.
That part is just about Cuba.
Okay, then you
And I was
should
like, that's-
mention Castro, because Castro and the communist revolution is what spurred a huge refugee crisis of Cubans coming to the United States. That's just the fact
But
of
it's
the matter.
solely laid at our feet.
I get it.
We
what
this is-
played. Go ahead.
No,
I
I'm
got.
saying, I'm with you 100%. When I watched them push back against you at CNN, I wanted to throw something.
Well,
at the
we're gonna.
window.
Okay. So hold on. So okay, a couple more. Like anyway, it goes on and on and on. Two more. There's a whole 55-minute video in African Heritage Museum. I might be blowing that, but that's what it's meant to showcase, and understandably so, and rightfully so. But in this 55-minute video, there's a montage where they compared George Floyd and Che Guevara to Jesus.
Oh God.
And I like
To Jesus?
I'm not. Can I? Okay. Amy, while I'm looking for this, can you pull up your white culture card too?
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
a good one.
Connor, can you please
pull that
go
up for me,
ahead
please? I'm
and
going to
pull
pull up
that
the
up.
exact pieces of art they frame. It's such a long list. I got to dig it out of this friggin'. Oh, here we go. Okay. All right. One segment places images of the death of Jesus Christ, the death of Che Guevara, and the death of George Floyd side by side and insinuates similarity between these three historical events. Here's the New York Times retelling of the scene. In one kaleidoscope sequence, for instance, stills of police officer Derek Chauvin kneeling on George Floyd's neck are juxtaposed with archival photographs of the executed revolutionary Che Guevara and the Renaissance painter Andrea Mantegna's lamentation over the dead Christ.
That's
now,
disgusting.
Is
so
the death
offensive.
of George Floyd horrible? Yes, it's horrible. Is Derek Chauvin in jail? Yes, he's in jail where he deserves to be. I don't care how much fentanyl he had in his body. We all watched the 7-minute video. It was disgusting. Now then, you think when you compare this to the death of Jesus, it doesn't need to be revisited? Hit me with the white culture card, and then I'll tell you what happened at CNN, and then I'm going to pass to Kaizen. Because I want to hear where I'm getting this wrong, okay?
I mean, they did end up revoking it after much complaint, which is good. They took it out of the, I believe it was.
Well, it needed to be revised.
What is it even about?
It essentially says that things like
race.
That things like hard work, discipline. Could we zoom in a little bit? Self-reliance, independent, and autonomy.
Winning at all costs is in there.
These things,
the fact that we're aggressive is in there. That we're inherently an aggressive race.
Oh
and
my
winning
God.
at all. I swear to God.
Wait,
it is in
where
there.
was this posted?
I mean,
It's right there.
It was literally on display
This is
at
at
the
the
museum. No, it was revoked. It was
Where
removed.
was this
In
thing?
the African, Connor, could you give me the exact? I've lost it in my notes because we were going to do it
Holy
at the end.
shit, seriously?
This was,
Yes.
This was quite...
Yes.
Oh my God,
Yes.
this is not okay.
No,
This
tell me when I can get to the CNN piece.
And so what is really offensive about this isn't just to white people, it's offensive to people of color to say that, okay, you can't be organized, you can't have self-reliance, you can't do these things because of the color of your skin, because that is exclusively
Also,
a white
it's offensive
culture
to people
thing.
who
Like,
aren't white, and they're all of these things. Like, and what's wrong with being
So it was the National
It
Museum
comes
of...
down to, though, that we're aggressive and that we need to win at all costs. Like, again, like.
But isn't it kind of racist to say that only white people are
That's
like
what I
the
just-
go-getters?
that's what I mean.
And
Like,
everyone else is like, you know,
That is
they're
what
not.
I said.
Like, yeah.
That is more offensive, I think, to tell black people and disenfranchising, and that's a bigger curse on their life, us telling them that, than the color of their skin itself. That in itself is not a curse at all. It's us telling them that it is.
It's
No,
also the
isn't.
curse of low expectations, right?
Yes.
You're telling them that people rise to the expectation that you have for them.
Kaizen, what do you think? Because I want to hear from you, actually.
Well, I also want to get your. I want to give one more thing, and then I want to.
go ahead.
Okay.
This is the museum, too, by the way. It was the National Museum of African American History and Culture.
Okay. Can you pull up the opening of my clip with Abby Phillips? And I want to set it up as follows. Notice that I don't bring up slavery. They do. Notice that all the things I'm citing, actually, only one thing I brought up was Benjamin Franklin that even references slaves. So when this woman says we're whitewashing slavery, I said that's not what he's attempting to do, with the intention of showing things that have nothing to do with slavery. Then it becomes a conversation about slavery, in which case I then turn around and say, you know, hey, not all white people are the devil. Only 2% of all white Americans own slaves. And yes, I appreciate it was like 25% in the South.
In the
but
South,
that's
yeah.
because other states in the country had banned it as being morally reprehensible. So take a look at this real quick. We're going to set this whole thing up, and then I'm going to pass to you, and you can let it rip. Have at it. On me, on the situation, whatever you think.
He's gone into the Smithsonian. He's effectively now has some random person deciding what is appropriate for the Smithsonian to teach in terms of American history, things that don't offend parts of the MAGA base, right? So we're now literally reviewing parts of American history and parts of American
MAGA's
culture to make
racist.
sure it
Your
comports with dear leader and what the MAGA
Can we
organization
address
wants.
some of those things that
So-
are in there? Because have you looked at some of the things that
Yeah,
are being
slavery.
reviewed?
Yeah, slavery was a bad thing that
but
was
the-
to talk about.
Okay,
like forgive me
he's
for
not
saying that.
whitewashing slavery. So
he's not?
He's not. No.
Okay.
He's not. And you cannot tie imperialism and racism and slavery to just one race, which is pretty much what every single exhibit does. But let's talk about the fact that when you look
anti-slavery,
let's talk about the fact that
get into all these other
slavery in
things.
America was.
do you realize that only less than 2% of white Americans owned slaves?
But it was a system of white supremacy.
You realize that
African
slavery
Americans
is
were
thousands
slaves
of
and
years old?
White people were
Do you know
the slave
who
owners.
was the first race
I
to
didn't
try
realize
to
this was
end
controversial.
slavery?
Okay,
Well, it was
okay.
controversial.
So it became about
This is an extraordinary act.
Then she accuses me of bringing it up, which I didn't bring it up. And then I was like, you're strawmanning my argument. I never actually brought this up. You brought it up. And then you're making the same case that white oppression, white is bad, when this whole thing was actually not about slavery.
In that 50-page document that the administration sent you in regard to what they have issues
There's maybe
with.
one reference to slaves, and that's
Okay,
Benjamin Franklin.
but the other stuff is like
all the stuff I showed you.
Okay, got it. Okay.
All literally all.
So
the
why
stuff,
does she
trans
think
stuff, like gender identity stuff, gay flag first in the door, eliminating Castro, the white culture card. This is, and that's why I was saying that's not what he's trying to do. And I was trying to show all of these different things that had nothing to do with slavery. But then when I got pulled into that conversation, I was so goddamn sick of hearing how all whitey, like, oh my God, I'm like, you know, not all of us suck.
Jillian,
The vast majority of us don't suck, and they didn't suck then. Yes, we did horrible things. White people did horrible things. We're not the only people to do horrible things, but we did it. At the same time, one would hope that you would take inspiration away from the fact that there were also good guys who were white, fighting against it, making it illegal, banning it in their states, and willing to die for it. So now, go. Hit me where I'm missing this, please.
You keep acting like I'm going to hit you. I'm not going to hit you.
You know
Even
what
if
it
I
is?
disagree, I'm not
feel
going
like
to hit you.
I want to know,
Yeah.
where am I getting this wrong?
Yeah. So let me talk about what I think is underneath this whole discussion.
Please.
We actually have to go back to almost the origins of American slavery.
Okay.
Right? Because basically, if you this is obviously super simplifying it, but what happened was Europeans who were white came to West Africa.
Right.
They saw West Africans. They said, okay, these people are less advanced, and this must be fundamental to what they are. They're just a different class of humans, right? And they're inherently worse in all sorts of ways. That was the European mindset.
Got it.
Right? Now, fast forward hundreds of years later, I think what's happening is actually kind of a reversal, where now there's people who are saying, oh, white people are inherently worse in some way.
That's
but
true.
instead of it being technologically worse or civilizationally worse, it's morally
worse.
So what happens is anytime we have these discussions, because we're talking about race, we're actually focusing on the wrong thing when we need to be focused on the software, not the hardware. There's nothing about being inherently white or inherently black that makes someone inherently morally superior or inferior. But every time we talk about oppression and hostility and hatred, we racialize it inherently.
Yeah,
And
you're right.
It's race essentialism. So we say, oh, all white people. Well, what about Slavic people? Like Slavic, the word literally comes from slave. So Slavic people, like in Eastern Europe, they were enslaved by the Ottoman Empire.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So
Oh my God, I love you so much.
Yeah, so,
Yes.
so the slavery all throughout history, but what happens is in America, we become so hyper fixated on what happened in America, which
Yeah.
is important. Of course, we should mention slavery, and you never denied that.
No!
But I think the point that you were trying to make, and is difficult in that environment, is there's a much broader context
Yeah.
here.
Yes.
And the evils of slavery are not particular to melanin.
I literally
okay?
said that. I'm like, you cannot paint only one race with
Yeah.
this.
So in
And
the
not all white people
exactly.
perpetuated this.
Okay,
Exactly.
Jillian,
So
I-
just to
hold on,
finish
hold on.
here.
Yeah, wait.
So in the analysis of American history, of course, we need to acknowledge that
100%.
yes, there was a racialized institution of slavery, and in that racialized institution of slavery, white people were placed at the top of the hierarchy, and black people were placed at the bottom. That doesn't mean that current white people identify with that mindset, because it was a culture, it was a software that was adopted, and it happened to be adopted by these people. But all throughout human history, people have been justifying slavery through different methodologies. This is just the American way that we did it. We should be aware of it so we don't repeat it.
Yes.
But we shouldn't be so fixated on that we conflate someone's color of their skin with their ideology.
Can I just want to follow up on one thing he said before we lose the thread. What you just said about the persecution of, Slavic individuals by the Ottoman Empire, that like really spoke to me and resonated because, my parents came here in the late 1970s and early 1980s. They were refugees because of the fact that they were under, Soviet rule in Armenia, so they were oppressed under Soviet rule. But prior to that, the Armenian people suffered a genocide and persecution by the Ottoman Empire. And so the history of, my background, my ancestors, was one of persecution, slaughter, just terrible treatment. So when,
this is a
when
human
all of that
problem.
gets erased, and the only thing that matters is literally the color of my skin, and I get lumped in with like the Europeans who, brought slavery here to the United States, I just find it deeply offensive. And what it does is it creates this environment of, it breeds more racism, honestly.
Yeah, Jillian, I've been trying to speak for, I just want to say, I was trying to tell you this yesterday. I was infuriated by the way that they treated you. What you essentially did was seek to knock down one of the core tenets of their existence, and that is minority victimhood. The fact that they cannot take any responsibility, and you're taking away one of their categorical imperatives, their racial grievance. They rely on that in order to not have to look at themselves and take any sort of responsibility for their own problems. That's what I firmly believe.
I want to show. Oh, I'm sorry, Lindy. Were you done with that thought?
Yeah.
You posted a video several. I can't remember how many days prior.
Thank you.
And it really spoke to me because it's about this vicious cycle. Can we play the end of this video, and then I want to talk about this for a minute?
Yeah.
It turns every problem into white supremacy while defending black degeneracy. And when the pendulum swings back, white people react with hostility. And then they defend white degeneracy.
Okay,
the only way out of this is to stop making morality about the color of people.
So now,
Because
we had already invited Kaizen to the show. This video came after that. I remember watching it, and it spoke to me because what is alarming to me about this is twofold. Number one, I have a black daughter. And I'm sorry for all the people that spammed the shit out of my Instagram who said to me, I hope your daughter's ashamed of you. You know what I hope more than anything? Is that my black daughter doesn't fear all white people, including the ones in her family, so fuck you. Now, on top of that, I have a white son who has white friends that are feeling marginalized by this. And my deep alarm is that it will breed a new generation of racists. And he is not, of course, but my point is, this is why young boys are finding their way over to the Andrew Tates of the world. In our house, it's Joe Rogan and Sean Ryan. I'm quite happy with that. But my point is that it's everything that you talk about, and that is my deepest concern, is that when you continue to push this narrative, you are creating a new generation of racists, and you are stoking the fires of racial division.
Yes, and someone needs to have the courage to say, it ends here. Because what has happened here is, look, black people in America were brought here in chains. Everyone understands that, and nothing will ever erase that. That was horrible. It was evil. And what I see now happening is the resentment that naturally comes from that event is just being transferred between racial groups. So I put a picture up of the Carmelo Anthony, Austin Metcalf incident. So for people who are not familiar, there was a white teenager, black teenager. White teenager confronted the black teenager because he was in the wrong place at a sporting event. Black teenager overreacted. He overreacted. He stabbed the white teenager, killed him. And then a lot of people, white people included, but especially black people, started donating to the black teenager, saying he was just defending himself.
Right?
No, more than, I think it was like 750 or yeah, it's like
they
500,
bought a huge
750.
house, I remember.
Yeah. So why did people do that? Well, people were justifying it by saying, oh, well, he was provoked and he was trying to defend himself, when it's like, in actuality, if the races had been reversed, you would not be donating to him.
No.
Right? Because you would realize this is just a person taking another person's life.
Justifiably so.
So what happened was they raised all this money, and then a few weeks later, this whole Shiloh Hendricks event happened where a white woman was at a park. A little black kid allegedly went through her bag trying to steal some stuff, or I don't know what happened. She calls a little kid the N-word. Okay, so should that kid have been in her bag? Absolutely not. Is calling a little kid the N-word a proportionate response to what's going on?
No.
Absolutely not. Now, I'm not equating what Shiloh Hendricks did with what Carmelo did, because one person killed a person, another person called someone a horrible name. But the point is, we keep justifying disproportionate responses. And what happened was a bunch of resentful white people started donating a lot of money to Shiloh Hendricks. Like, why are they doing that? Because they feel like they're being discriminated against. So it's an equal and opposite response. So eventually someone needs to say, look, we need to stop fighting fire with fire. We need to throw water on all of this racial grievance stuff because it's not benefiting anyone. Because as I said before, hatred hurts both the hater and the hated. At the end of the day, it always comes back. And instead of people justifying disproportionate responses and defensiveness and more hostility, recognize you're only hurting yourself. You're only hurting yourself.
I had one more example. Did you guys hear about the incident in, I believe it was actually Springfield, Ohio, where a kid was killed on a bus due to a car crash from an illegal immigrant, I believe a Haitian immigrant. And then when the father of that child did a press conference, he literally said these words, "I wish it was a white person who killed my son."
Wow.
And that just shows the level of like pressure that people feel to virtue signal, that in a time of grieving, of losing your son, you're afraid of being looked at in a bad way from the public.
I just think that the
really
only
sad.
way that this country is going to have a future is if we actually start respecting each other and have a shared identity as Americans.
Yes.
Respect each other because of the fact that we're all Americans and we should look out for each other. But we don't have that shared identity at all. And that's what I think is going to eventually destroy this country entirely, you know?
If I may, do you know, and this is not a quiz to make you look bad, but I'm curious if you know when the last time we had like a presidential approval rating of like 80% or more.
Was it 9/11?
9/11.
Yeah, 9/11.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah,
Why?
that's right. We all came together. We all came together as Americans.
I voted for Obama. I thought it was a huge progress.
I think it was probably pretty high at that point.
I was pretty happy about that.
But why was it Bush? Well, I think now people consider Bush a terrible president.
Yes.
But at the time, we had a shared enemy.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm not saying that we need a shared enemy. Well, I think we should have a shared enemy, and I think it's like cultural degeneration and hatred. That should be our enemy, not a people. But in the absence of a shared mission or shared purpose, we make each other the enemy. And that's what's happening is like, so we talk about like, why are all these like white liberal protesters marching in Black Lives Matter movements and all of this? It's because they lack a purpose that's bigger than race. They lack a purpose that's bigger than race. And in the absence of people, I think a lot of it is honestly just economic. When people feel like they don't have any economic opportunity, they give up and they feel depressed and they're just looking for something to make them feel important and useful in their life. So I think that's underneath a lot of this. But yeah, we need something that causes us to look up rather than down at each other.
I feel like it's already kind of happening like a little bit. And you're right. The common enemy, a little bit though. Anna and I were talking about this before we came on. Our common enemy should be the overlords and the deep state that have intentionally created a cultural system where these narratives are sowed because it creates division. And when we are divided, when we are disenfranchised, when we're sad, we are easier to control. They are the enemy. I'm not going to lie. I've been feeling incredibly black-pilled this year. However, what I have started to notice is that people across the political aisle, people on the left, right, center, anarchists, everyone, they're coming together to agree on some core issues. For example, foreign interests owning our politicians, things of this nature. This is what we should all be rallying behind because these are the ones who are creating the cultural rot in the first place. We need to focus on the actual cause and not slap a freaking Band-Aid on it, guys.
And I think it's like incumbent upon us to have the kinds of conversations that we have on this show where you have people from different perspectives, maybe even different political ideologies all together, just being able to respect each other even while they disagree, because at the end of the day, we are Americans, right? We love the country, we respect each other, and we have a shared identity in which, you know, basically propels us to want to find solutions to our problems rather than fight each other constantly.
Jillian, I want to go back to your CNN appearance and also just the exhibits that you brought up. I thought it was the ones that you picked out were really salient.
I didn't pick them. This is what was
the ones that you
sent to me.
Pick to discuss, I mean. The ones that you
was too
highlighted.
long, but they're all similar.
Yes.
I couldn't get through the PDF.
You know what that was reminiscent of? And I am a betting woman, I'm an investor, but like I would bet money that era of rewriting everything in the Smithsonian started with the Obama presidency and extended through the Biden era. This was giving the Obama apology tour when he went around the world and apologized essentially for being American. He went to like foreign heads of state and basically made excuses for foreign policy, made excuses for our way of life.
His foreign policy was garbage. Like he was
apologizing for like centuries of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's kind of why I like Trump's swagger. He's not apologizing. on the global stage. I don't think America should apologize to the world. Yes, we have problems here at home, but it stops at the water's edge. We need to present a united front. That is at least my point of view for how foreign policy should be conducted.
I don't know if right now is the time to make that argument.
I'm not talking about Gaza. I'm talking about Obama. This is 20 years ago. When
Yeah,
he was president.
but you know, we've had a history of like regime changes, destabilizing countries.
I think
I think it's okay to learn from those mistakes in the past. No,
I'm a very strong gung-ho American. I really think if we're going to fix our foreign policy, those are discussions we should have at home. But when we are going into, for example, a foreign palace or like the French capital, we should not be like bowing our heads in shame. We should be proud of being American. Number two, also this reminds me of the comment that Michelle Obama made. She's like, I can finally be proud of my country. I thought that was a shameful comment. This is, despite our flaws, we are the greatest nation on earth. The fact that we can be here today and talk about this without fear or favor is such a tremendous privilege. If we were somewhere in Asia right now, in China, for instance, we would be arrested right now, right this very moment. We are not allowed to criticize. People there are not allowed to say a word.
I know, and that's a bad
dissent.
thing.
That's a terrible thing.
Right, so
that's what I'm saying. In America, she said, "I'm finally proud of being American." I'm saying that's an awful thing to say because it's such a privilege to have the freedom of speech that we have. We should always be proud of our country, and in that pride, we are allowed to make these criticisms.
I agree.
You know?
Can I respectfully disagree with something that was said?
Of course.
Sure. So, Amy, you mentioned before that you think the real enemy is the elites and you know the systems that these elites control, and I think it's human nature for all of us to want an enemy that's embodied in human form, right? So we've been talking about how we do it to people who look a different color. You know, you go to Africa and it's like you do it to people from a different tribe, even though they're the same color. It's like no matter what the group is, we find a way to subdivide the group. And I actually think hostility toward elites is just part of that. Because it's easy for people to say, oh, well, these people control everything and they're the ones keeping the rest of us down. But I think the scarier realization might be no one's controlling everything. And the enemy is us. The enemy is our own.
I gotta admit,
I think I know who's.
I think it's BlackRock.
I think it's Bart.
I think it's Bart, Jillian.
The enemy is our own egos. Because I don't know about you guys, I've been screwed over by people who are poor and middle class too. And I know if I gave them more money, they would screw me over on a higher level. I also know very decent people who are poor and middle class, and if I gave them more money, I know that their character would shine through. So it's easy for us to say, oh, it's rich people, but I actually think, you know, this idea of aristocracy, right? The word aristocracy comes from
Excellence. I study Greek.
excellence. There you go. Excellence and the best, right? So there used to be sort of this social contract that there were people who were more equipped, more intelligent, more drive, more beauty, more charisma, and that was okay. But the idea was that those people would serve the rest because they're endowed with gifts that the masses are not. So the idea is when you get to the top, you serve the bottom. But that contract,
much is given, much is
required. But we've lost that. So yes, are there elites who for sure are manipulative and have outsized influence that's negative? Sure, but there's also lots of wealthy people who are good people and trying to do good things.
And I am in no way, can I just correct the position really quick?
Sure.
I in no way was trying to completely disenfranchise everyday people from being able to take accountability in whatever form, whether that be individually, within their community, within their family, whatever. But there are two things that are converging together at once. We cannot deny the fact that now, maybe not in America, but in the UK, there are literally hate speech laws in which someone can be thrown in jail for saying something. That was imposed by a government. And there are people who have a specific agenda in creating that. It creates more division. This whole thing that we've been talking about the whole time, their attempts at remedying things make the issues worse, and I think they know that. Like DEI, for example. DEI is a real example here in the United States of America.
So one thing that I'll add to it is I hear what you're saying, and I think, you know, personal responsibility is important. But just, I guess, to like get to your point and kind of flesh it out a little more, you know, there is a problem with crony capitalism in America, right? Like BlackRock, exactly. And so when it's becoming rigged. Look, I'm successful in my career, right? And I'm not poor, you know, I'm pretty affluent, I'm not rich either. I can't afford to buy a home with a yard, right? And so when opportunities like that are ripped away from Americans, I think that also breeds the kind of unrest that we're seeing in the country. And no amount of personal responsibility is going to help. And I would know there's a lot of personal responsibility in my life.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
That's not what I'm saying, though. I'm not saying the personal responsibility of just work harder or be more resourceful. I'm saying personal responsibility for the human condition itself, right? Because what I'm saying is
I see what you're saying.
You know, we're going to bring in Jesus, but he said,
Yay.
you know, why do you criticize a speck in someone else's eye when you don't see the log in yours?
Yes.
Right. So we're so easy to say, oh, well, this person's doing this, and when it's like that person is just a reflection of the human condition. And I'm not saying that that person might not have more power to oppress a poor person than the poor person has over them. Obviously, they have more power.
Right.
But what I'm saying is the person is not uniquely evil. We all have a capacity for good and evil.
I agree with that.
And to even the point about slavery, I think that's a lot of what's going on here. It's like we don't have the humility to recognize, wait, these demons and angels exist in all of us.
Absolutely.
Right? So I'm not saying we shouldn't hold
point.
at least that's your point. Yeah. So I'm not going to hit you. I think you're correct, but we don't want to say that because that's the ultimate responsibility. It's almost like a spiritual responsibility. It's like, wow, maybe if and this we're going to get controversial. It's like imagine if Europeans had been black and Africans had been white. Do we think that those Europeans would have come over and said, "Oh, we're not going to enslave you"? Because they're morally superior? No, it was an economic system.
There were incidents of
It's
that.
literally
And
called
black-
a
and there
mercantile
were-
system.
In North Africa, the Barbary slave trade, there were black Africans and Arab Africans who did enslave white people. So there's not something unique
the
here.
board, like race to race.
All over the world.
And there's imperialism through every ethnicity.
Yeah.
The Asians.
Yes.
the
I mean, have you heard of the Century of Humiliation? That happened in
Actually, I
China.
have not.
Yes, the War of Opium, the Opium War.
I don't know anything about
So Great Britain essentially invaded China. Did you hear about this? Like
No.
150 years ago.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
All
We
right.
have limited time.
I
Can we
was
talk
going to
about the
say
tunnels?
we've got okay. I'm breaking the fourth wall here. Justin, we have 3 huge segments and it shows 4 minutes on my clock. What do you want me to do here? I got Nick Fuentes, Tucker Carlson, and Candace. I got the tunnels I didn't get to. I got Trump and Putin, which is happening as we speak, I think, or today.
I think we should do Putin. Honestly, guys, I'm actually dropping a super in-depth thing on the tunnels on my channel in like next week. So if you want to find out about the tunnels and get tinfoiled hat with me, come along on the journey. I'm really glad we used this segment for this because I think you brought a really great
You are a
perspective.
bastion of
honestly.
wisdom.
Yeah,
I'm seriously impressed by you.
It's been really great
Very
to have you on
great.
the show. So I'd be more than happy to forfeit my segment for this.
Okay.
I think we should discuss Putin really
Let's
quickly
do
because
it.
it's in the title.
Let's do it.
Let's
Okay.
do it.
Sure.
Anna, I'm just passing. I'm just going.
Wait,
that's
what
Oh, no,
actually-
that was Lindy.
Oh, that's
That was
Lindy's.
actually
I'm
me.
sorry. Okay, Lindy, tell me when you're ready. I'll set you up then.
This.
Oh, you're good? Do it, girl.
Do you want to go?
Nope,
Okay.
not if you're ready to rock.
In politics, we would call this a BFD. Okay, this is the first time that, first of all,
better intro.
let me give you 2 benchmarks here. This is the first time that Putin has met with the United States president since 2021 before he invaded Ukraine. Number 1. This is the second time he's been to the United States since 2007 that wasn't for United Nations General Assembly. So this is really a big deal. And they met in Alaska, of all places, which guess what? Used to be a Russian colony. Did you know that? We got the best real estate deal in the world. It was something called.
Oh yeah, we bought it
It's
for
called
like nothing.
Seward's
I actually
Folly.
do remember this.
It's called.
learned
Remember
it doing my
William
kids' homework.
Seward? William Seward was Abraham Lincoln's Secretary of State. And he had this crazy idea. He's like, Russia wants to unload this frozen tundra that they can't handle anymore. It's very expensive. And at that time, they were fighting in the Crimea, of course. They're always fighting the Crimea. And like, we can no longer afford to maintain this land. And there's nothing there, of course. There's no oil. Oil doesn't mean anything. And they offloaded it to us. And then William Seward caught so much flack because Americans are like, why do we need this frozen piece of land? Which turned out to be massively rich of natural resources and I mean, totally kick-ass real estate deal. Good for him. Like rivaling the Louisiana Purchase.
Something so cheap. I can't remember the number. I think it was
like 18 million.
Yes,
Exactly.
I know it was like 18.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
Just phenomenal. Which is why actually this is a little bit of a sidebar, but some Russians are saying today that that deal no way is that legitimate because obviously it was too sweet of a deal. And so some people are asking Putin to reclaim it, but that's a sidebar. But anyway, this is really, really important. Trump is actually in the last couple of hours, he's trying to downplay it by saying it's just a, we're just touching base to see what sort of deal we can negotiate, but he's trying to manage expectations. Something that he says over and over again is, whenever I have a good conversation with Putin, I think things are going to go well. But then I go back to the residents and I ask the First Lady, I was like, honey, I just had a great conversation with Vladimir today. And she's like, oh, really? Because Ukraine was just bombed.
Yeah, I mean, look, Russia's winning this war. That's just the fact of the matter. In 2022, there was an opportunity to engage Russia for peace negotiations. Zelensky was told by Boris Johnson at the time, he was the Prime Minister of the UK at the time, to basically avoid that. They were discouraged. And part of the reason why is because the West wanted the war to go on in order for Russia to weaken its military capability. And by the way, that allowed for the regime change in Syria because Russia was preoccupied with Ukraine, couldn't come in and protect their ally Syria or Bashar al-Assad in Syria. And after Bashar al-Assad fell, now you have the former head of al-Qaeda essentially as the new leader of Syria, which is kind of disastrous. But anyway, putting that aside, now Russia's winning the war, and they keep taking more and more territory in Ukraine.
20%.
Now, yes,
terrifying.
Exactly. And Lindy, like, this is so terrible because Trump does want peace. He wants the war to end. It was one of his promises when he ran, but it's a lot more difficult to bring Russia to the table and for Putin to really engage sincerely when he's winning. You know what I'm saying? And he wants to, you know, solidify his influence in that region of the world. And I don't know if Trump's going to be able to get Putin to engage for peace deals, especially because now Zelensky is like, I don't want to give up any territory. You know, Trump says, maybe we're going to do a territory swap. And Zelensky's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not in favor of that. So already there's like a red line that's been crossed by what Trump is proposing as part of a potential peace deal. I don't know what's going to come out of this meeting with Putin. I wish there would be peace in the follow-up to it. But I'm pretty black-pilled on this issue.
There are two things that I want to bring up. Did you guys see the Hillary Clinton thing? I think it was just this morning where she's like, I would give Trump the Peace Prize if he was able to resolve this, and there was no land given up. That's an impossibility.
It is impossible.
We already know that's an impossibility because now Putin is in this position of power. So there's also talk that he will go back, though, and we've discussed this, that he's going to sell weapons through NATO and give them to Ukraine, with the key difference here is that we're not going to be paying for these weapons. NATO is going to be buying them from us. And he's going to do hardcore sanctions again.
They don't work.
They haven't.
They don't
secondary
work.
Sanctions don't seem to work. So
this war has actually, it's kind of exposed our asses. And I'm worried about that.
Yeah.
Because it shows the influence that the United States no longer has. The sanctions have not harmed Russia. In fact, as we've talked about on this show before, the various countries, the BRICS countries specifically, of which Russia is part of, have found a workaround to the SWIFT international banking system. And so there's that. Obviously, we haven't been able to help Ukraine win this war against Russia. It shows American weakness.
Yes, and you know what it shows? It shows China that they can invade Taiwan with no repercussions. And this is what it is. This is actually, it reminds me, this is actually the resurgence of something that came out of the Peloponnesian Wars thousands of years ago. Thucydides, the historian, said, might makes right. And what I mean by that is if you have the resources and the strength to invade a country and you win, then you're right and you get to rewrite history. And that's what Russia is doing because they are winning. And, I mean, Anna's totally right. That's what's happening on the ground. And Amy, I want to address something that you said, or I think it was Jillian. It's not just the fact that we wanted to give Ukraine time to win the war. It's also because we are held hostage by the military-industrial complex. In this country, the defense contractors who basically own our politicians, they wanted to prolong this conflict because they are slurping at the trough of the profits right now. Okay, that is why this has been going on for 3 years.
Yeah, I really think Trump should have never started this thing by saying the day he gets in, he's going to end it. It set up so many expectations to fail, and
Kaizen.
Yeah. The Ukraine-Russia thing is
Big sigh.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because it's. I think Lindy pointed out there's two competing worldviews, and one worldview is, hey, there's a rule-based international order.
Bretton Woods,
where,
you know.
Yeah, and it's like, hey, if someone breaks the rules, then people who are participating in the rules are required to step in. And I think a lot of Americans have lost the appetite for enforcing a rules-based international order.
Those norms have been thrown out the window.
Yeah,
There's no
I
such
think
thing as international law. It's a fallacy.
Yeah, I think that's what's happening.
And
now,
that's scary, by the way.
And here's the thing, it's like, it's easy to say we need to defend Ukraine, but if you're willing to defend Ukraine, you need to be willing to go all the way. We actually need to be willing to put American boots on the ground.
And
I don't think people want that.
No, we don't.
So it's like, we can do some things with sanctions on the margins, but evidently they're not working. So the solution might just be, hey, we're here to mediate, but ultimately, you guys are on your own. It's not our fight. That's not our borders.
That's totally right. You are like my spirit animal. Why haven't we done that before? I want to explain why sanctions are not working. It's because we need secondary sanctions on those BRICS nations, Anna, that you were talking about.
was going to do
but
that,
it's
though.
India in particular that is the problem. Because India and China, they're gobbling up Russian oil, so they're less dependent on Western nations. They are thriving
But you want to know why? Because if you basically take Russia out of the equation, that lowers the supply of oil in the international market, and our oil prices are going to go up.
That's exactly why Trump is right now still in the rhetoric stage, not really implementing, because he understands that we are also going to be negatively impacted if India and China face the real consequences. But this is just really, and it shows how interdependent this world is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
Any final thoughts? Do we have any updates on any new news before I let it go? We put this last in the event that there was. All right, you guys, please like, share, comment, subscribe. It helps us out a ton with the algorithm. Thank you for being here. Anna, where do we get more from you?
You guys can find me. Just Google my name. But I just want to use my time to thank Kaizen, because you are one of my favorite guests. I wasn't familiar with you before, and you're just so thoughtful and thought-provoking. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Where can we find you?
Yeah, if you like my work, you can find me by Googling me too. And I'm also launching a course on helping people to critically think through media bias. That's what this shirt's about. It's called Clear Thinker. So if you go to clearthinkeracademy.com, you can get on the mailing list and be alerted when it launches, which is going to be this week.
Can we get that for like everyone? Like, can that become like obligatory in the education system?
Yeah,
that is incredible.
I'm giving out a free lesson from it, so everyone will get something, and then if they want, they can pay for the full. It's going to be a course and a community, and I hope it helps humanity.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. To echo Anna's sentiments, I'm very happy to meet you in person. Like I mentioned, I watched your stuff when you had a much smaller platform back when I was living in Hawaii, and you were more like spirituality, personal development. So cool to see a pivot, because we need people like you in this space. We really, really do. You guys can find me at my channel, Amy Dangerfield. I have a show called Dangerous Conversations, and then you can also message me on Manette.
Hi, everyone. Lindy Lee. I'm on Manette, and I'm Lindy Lee on X, and I just want to say Jillian was totally right about you. It was such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Well, totally right.
No, you were just like, this guy's amazing.
Could I be more right?
You were right.
How long have I been asking for it? All right, that's it. Have a great weekend, guys.
Thank you.